Welcome to Relax Story, a place where gentle stories help you leave behind the noise of the day and slowly drift into a peaceful sleep. Each soft, soothing narration is designed to relax your mind, release tension, and guide you to a deeper sense of calm within. If you enjoy the experience, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay with Relax Story every night. And feel free to leave a comment to share your thoughts or suggest a story you'd love to hear. Now close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let Relax Story guide you into a restful deep sleep. Dawn breaks over the Andes of Peru. As the first strands of light slip through the dense veils of cloud, Machu Picchu emerges like an apparition suspended between earth and sky, poised between two steadfast peaks, Machu Picchu, the old peak, and Huayna Picchu, the new peak. The ancient city rests upon a narrow mountain saddle rising hundreds of meters above the Urubamba River valley, some 80 kilometers northwest of Cusco, where humid tropical air mingles with thick mist, cloaking the eastern slopes of the Andes and setting this place apart from the world below. The fog drifts slowly, pouring itself over stone roofs and terraced fields, forming a shifting veil through which the first light must struggle to pass, revealing a height of nearly 2,430 meters above sea level, a place with no direct path from the plains, a place long avoided by men for its peril and isolation. Along the mountain's flank, terraces stretch in careful succession, not merely fields for cultivation, but structures that hold the earth itself in place, stabilizing the terrain, merging so completely with the slope that they seem born of it, an inseparable part of nature, rendering the entire landscape at once precise and sacred. Stone walls, assembled from massive blocks without mortar, fit so tightly that it is as though the earth and the human hand have become one. The whole city appears to hover within the clouds, unreachable from the lowlands, declaring that this is no accidental ruin, but a system wrought with deliberate care, where every stone, every step, every ascending path reflects intention, a knowledge of land, of nature's force, and of human will. Machu Picchu, a city of the 15th century Inca Empire, rose during the height of imperial power, built without the use of wheels, iron, or mortar. Stones weighing many tons were set with such precision that they have endured for centuries, making it one of the few pre-Columbian sites to remain nearly intact. Its layout extends from dwellings to temples, connected by stairways and steep paths to the terraces, revealing a harmony between daily life, belief, and engineering. This refinement is not merely technical skill, it stands as evidence of a tightly ordered society, and a system of power in which every detail was measured to withstand both time and the trials of nature. Yet a striking paradox remains: a complete city, with planning, water systems, and social structure, set at a perilous height where access is difficult and survival uncertain. Men seek ease, fertile ground, and open trade. Yet here, at Machu Picchu, they chose the opposite. The city becomes an architectural enigma, where each terrace, each wall, each steep path challenges the very notion of where a city should stand, transforming the whole into a symbol of power, vision, and enduring boldness. The presence of power, embodied in Pachacuti Inca Yupanqui, the ruler believed to have created Machu Picchu, lingers in every line of the city. Without appearing, he is present in its design, in the choice of its location, in the extraordinary capacity to organize, or where each decision bears both strategy and a profound understanding of nature. The city stands as a reflection of authority, foresight, and the ability to gather people to realize an idea that borders on the impossible. From this paradox arises a central question: why would a civilization choose to build at such a dangerous height? Was it error, reckless ambition, or a calculation carried out with exacting precision, where terrain, climate, and design were all weighed to ensure survival? Perhaps this height was never an obstacle, but the very reason for its existence, a shield, and at once a testament to a superior mastery in choosing place and shaping form. To understand such a decision, one cannot begin with Machu Picchu itself, but must look to the land, to its people, and to the history of the Andes before the city came to be. Deep valleys, towering peaks, winding rivers, each landscape shaped the choice of location, tested intellect and power, until every path, every stair, every stone of Machu Picchu becomes clearer, and yet the mystery remains, quiet and enduring, as though still suspended among the morning clouds in the first light of the Andes. Before the 15th century, when the peaks of the Andes stood like vast natural walls stretching for thousands of kilometers, pre-Inca communities found ways to endure within narrow valleys and upon steep slopes, where the morning light could only enter in thin fragments between sheer rock faces. The sacred valley, through which the Urubamba River flows, opened a meeting place between the strength of the mountains and the stillness of the Amazon forest to the east, forming a unique ecosystem in which every tree, every stream, every layer of soil held the power to sustain or to destroy. The Andes, extending more than 7,000 kilometers, reveal a clear stratification by altitude, each climate zone, each mountainside offering its own trials and opportunities. The sacred valley became a vital center for cultivation and exchange, laying the groundwork for decisions that would shape the future. The slopes rise almost vertically, in places narrowing into thin ridges where the soil yields easily to heavy rains, creating an environment unfit for conventional cities, yet rich in strategic value beyond simple measure. Seasonal rains bring both life and danger. Earthquakes return in cycles. Landslides remind men of the fragility of existence, where life is not given but must be wrested from nature. The Urubamba River cuts through the deep valley, providing water throughout the year, nourishing the land where the first terraces began to take form, where the sacred valley grew into a stable agricultural heart, where life persisted even in the shadow of danger. The pre-Inca communities, unnamed as individuals but present across millennia, learned to cultivate the slopes, to plant upon fragments of earth, to shape the earliest terraces, and to move along natural paths carved into the mountains. These paths, uneven yet enduring through generations, became lines of connection, a silent network of passage not built through advanced technique, but formed through experience and adaptation. They did not conquer the Andes, they learned to live with it, to breathe with the land, the water, and the thinning air of the heights. Their knowledge of terrain, water, soil, and climate formed a foundation not for control, but for adaptation, for survival in conditions where any attempt to impose dominance would fail. Danger and abundance existed side by side. Landslides, Earthquakes and steep slopes set the boundaries of trial, while water, natural resources, and defensible terrain opened opportunities seen only by those who understood the rhythm of the land. Height offered vision, terrain restricted access. The valley served as a natural trade route, all combining into hidden strategic value, fragments that would later determine the choice of place. If the paths leading to Machu Picchu today truly trace those ancient roots, then the city is not a beginning, but a convergence, a place where a long-standing network found its culmination, where life, trade, and culture from many generations of pre-Inca peoples met and intertwined. The Andes and the Sacred Valley were no chance selection. They were a landscape tested by nature and experienced by man. When the Inca arrived, they did not find emptiness. They inherited a system already in being, refining and expanding it upon the foundation, shaped by both nature and those who came before, transforming peaks, slopes, valleys, and rivers into a network of enduring strategy and survival. In the early 15th century, from the remote slopes of the Andes, a small power began to take shape, not merely a mountain tribe, but the living core of an empire on the rise. The year 1438 marked a turning point. Pachacuti Inca Yupanqui ascended the throne and transformed the way the Inca saw themselves and the world around them, opening an age of swift and deliberate expansion. The city of Cusco, set within the lush green valleys of southern Peru, became the political and ceremonial heart, where roads, plazas, and architecture began to assume the form of a vast imperial order. Within a single century, Inca influence spread across the length of the Andes, ruling over nearly 12 million people, across valleys, plateaus, and mountain slopes where space and time themselves seemed to gather into one. Life was no longer merely survival. It became the work of building order, of forging unseen connections through mountains and valleys, roads that led toward power, rivers that became the lifeblood of an empire ascending into history. Pachacuti Inca Yupanqui was not only a warrior, but an architect of power. He turned military victory into administrative order, made Cusco a center of coordination where nobles, labor forces, and the state systems of communication moved together with the steady rhythm of gears inside some immense machine. In conquering many peoples from southern Peru to the lands now known as Quito, he did more than widen borders. He shaped the very way the empire understood itself as center, as symbol, as governance, as an infrastructure of connection. Viracocha Inca, his father, belonged to the age before the Great Surge and gave way to Pachacuti, who laid the foundations for an Inca history later chronicled with greater coherence and a measure of unity. Under Pachacuti's hand, the Inca expanded with astonishing force. The small sphere of power around Cusco was transformed into a multi-ethnic, multilingual empire, where nearly 12 million people speaking more than 30 different languages were bound together by a single order and a single system of rule. Victory on the battlefield meant little without roads to bind the land, without those invisible pulses through forest and mountain, without the means to move messages, people, goods, and officials across a vast dominion. Chapakñan, the road network stretching 30,000 kilometers, crossed snowy peaks, rainforests, and fertile valleys, turning harsh space into the bloodstream of power. These roads were not merely routes of travel, but bridges between the center and the far reaches, allowing authority to become visible and to spread outward, carrying messages at speeds that may have reached as much as 241 kilometers in a day, a ceaseless rhythm, like a living pulse that could not be stilled. As the empire grew, military triumph no longer sufficed. Labor, resources, agricultural yield, mountain routes, and strategic lands all had to be drawn into one shared order. Pachacuti did not merely conquer. He reorganized the valley of Cusco, redirected rivers, leveled ground, and built terraces into the hillsides, creating forms that embodied the power to shape the world, where military might became part of structure itself, part of an architecture that declared authority. Power did not merely spread outward. It began to exist through position, through form, through the space it claimed and mastered, reshaping the landscape and the very way it was seen. By the middle and late 15th century, the Inca had become the greatest political force in pre-Columbian southwestern South America. Yet the true climax lay not in any single battle, but in the need for symbols of power that could be seen, strategic anchors that would secure the presence of the state, once roads, political centers, and systems of control were in place. The empire required ceremonial centers, monuments that proclaimed authority beyond the ordinary demands of survival, shifting from expansion to affirmation, from taking land to inscribing itself upon the landscape. Power began to reveal itself not only through borders, but through shape, through placement, through enduring presence in earth and mountain. In this setting, Machu Picchu may be seen as a spatial declaration. It was not merely a secluded place of residence, but carried the logic of an empire at the height of its growth, where power, geography, and symbol converged. It may have been a proclamation of authority, a strategic structure set in an ideal position, a place where order, power, and landscape met, where connection and presence became visible between mountain slope and valley. It was not only architecture, but the reflection of a vision, a possibility explored by an empire still expanding, giving rise to many interpretations and refusing to be enclosed within a single answer. Born of an empire expanding, concentrating power, and raising works worthy of that ambition, Machu Picchu became a strategic anchor reflecting Pachacuti's vision, where every terrace, every path, every block of stone formed part of an order, part of a power both fashioned and made present among the mountains. It opens the possibility that between victory, control, and symbol, human beings found a way to write their mark upon the landscape, to turn power into architecture, architecture into presence, and presence into an immortal declaration. In the middle of the 15th century, when the first light of dawn broke through the Andes, the Inca Empire had reached a moment when thought was no longer bound to the plain demands of survival. It was in this age that Machu Picchu emerged, a place lifted high among the peaks, where earth, sky, and human will met, while the empire stretched from the sacred valley to distant frontiers. Upon steep mountain slopes and within heavy mist, Pachacuti Inca Yupanqui set down the first steps of a vision that showed power was measured not only in armies or in roads, but in symbolic centers able to anchor ritual order, display central authority, and impress the will of the king upon the very terrain itself, upon every stone and every surrounding valley. His decisions were more than a choice of site. They were a declaration of the union of power and architecture, of geography and knowledge, a step that opened a question enduring across centuries. Why was Machu Picchu chosen? Machu Picchu does not rest in a level valley or upon some convenient plain. It rises from a narrow mountain ridge between the peaks of Machu Picchu and Huayna Picchu, above the deep valley of the Urubamba River, nearly 80 kilometers from Cusco. Tropical mountain forest embraces the ruins at an altitude of 2,430 meters above sea level, where light glimmers upon the leaves and sheer limestone slopes, where each stone and terrace seems to merge with the natural cliff itself, high, steep, and difficult to reach, yet possessed of unrivaled command of the view, set apart from the world below. It is a place where every footstep and every stone bears the weight of symbol, raising the question that all who behold it must ask, why was this place chosen? Only when power, vision, and the Inca state came together could such a place become real, transformed from harsh terrain into a declaration of empire. Pachacuti Inca Yupanqui stood at the center of that vision. The Sapa Inca, who reigned from about 1438 to 1471, the maker of an empire that expanded farther and faster than ever before. He was not only an emperor, but an architect of power, the founder of a new Inca order in which urban planning, architecture, and the shaping of landscape moved alongside political strategy. Machu Picchu may have been his palace complex, a place where power was not read through speech or writing, but made present in stone, in flights of steps, and in ceremonial design. The layers of builders, stone craftsmen, and organizers of labor stood as an unseen yet living machinery, turning the emperor's will into material form, every stone borne by their hands becoming an answer to the challenge of mountain and wilderness. No internal records or chronicles remain. Machu Picchu left behind no direct explanation for its existence. One must read the site through stone, through terrain, through the subtle calculation of each terrace and each wall. Archaeological study, architectural inquiry, and analysis of the site have only begun to reveal paths of interpretation, from royal estate to palace complex. Yet all must still rest upon material traces, silent and steadfast through the centuries. It is that very silence that turns each stone into speech on the king's behalf, and all who look upon it must listen not only with their eyes, but with the imagination. The signs at Machu Picchu show that this was no temporary military refuge. Its temples, refined residential quarters, ceremonial spaces, and terrace design reflect a project measured with the greatest care. Walls, stairways, and sloping ways seem to cut into the mountain face with natural grace, yet with full intention, lifting the whole complex beyond the ordinary needs of daily life. Its scale and finish reveal immense investment, a site chosen with precision, every detail bearing symbol and function together. Machu Picchu thus became a supreme urban creation, affirming the Inca Empire at the height of its greatness. If one considers three parallel possibilities behind the choice of site, first, Machu Picchu may have been a royal estate secluded, offering a setting worthy of power, drawing the emperor nearer to the heavens both in image and in ritual. Second, it may have been an important ceremonial center, where sacred structures and a singular layout created a spiritual focus, binding humanity to nature and to the gods. Third, Machu Picchu may have stood as a strategic symbol of power, where geography itself became a political message, a message Pachacuti sent to the multitudes and to the conquered lands, requiring no words and yet bearing witness to supreme authority. There is no need to choose a single explanation. The more closely one looks, the more the monument resembles will itself made stone, where every choice and every rock suggest the vision of an emperor. What emerges is the understanding that Machu Picchu did not arise by chance. It was the union of political vision, ritual, space, and symbol, a creation beyond time. Had Pachacuti chosen a lower place, a nearer place, a more convenient place, this might have been no more than an ordinary work among many others. By choosing height, choosing mist, choosing separation, Machu Picchu became a symbol beyond function, where terrain, climate, and technique came together to make the king's will live again in every stone. And once that will had been declared, the next question was no longer why this place was chosen, but how a city could be built upon so perilous a mountain slope, a mystery opening into the creativity and skill of humankind, so that Machu Picchu might stand there still, loftily, unwavering and yet elusive within the mists of the Andes. In the middle of the 15th century, upon the mist-laden slopes of the Andes, Machu Picchu began to take shape as a living question. What, truly, could human hands achieve against the force of nature? The city was not merely raised, it had to endure, to stand firm through relentless rains, upon steep terrain and shifting ground, defying every expectation of physics and design. The surrounding landscape offered no mercy. Water fell as though intent on sweeping all things downward. Mud crept into every crevice, and the earth itself seemed at times to stir like a weary, breathing body. Each stone, each step, ceased to be a symbol of power and became instead a quiet answer to a single question. How does one survive within absolute harshness? Machu Picchu was never a scattered collection of beautiful structures, but a finely integrated system. Terraces spread like green strokes across the mountainside, the urban quarters unfolded with houses, plazas, and temples. Steep slopes embraced the whole. Water channels threaded through its layers, and precisely fitted stones formed a steadfast foundation. Mountain rains fell without rest. Mist lingered thick, slopes rose sharply, and soil remained vulnerable to erosion. Every technical decision arose from a harmony between nature and human will. Any misstep would have led to instability, and to grasp this truth is to begin understanding the solutions hidden beneath the city's outward beauty. Anonymous hands brought forth this quiet marvel. Stoneworkers cut, shaped, and set each block with such precision that walls stood without mortar, yet remained supple against the mountain's subtle tremors. Designers of the water system harnessed natural springs, guiding water through stone channels that stretched for hundreds of meters, distributing it to vital spaces, controlling its flow, preserving the structures from ruin by rain. The inhabitants and the elite did not build directly, yet their needs for clean water, safe passage, ceremonial spaces, and stable ground gave rise to every technical solution, turning Machu Picchu into a work that served life, authority, and ritual at once. Upon the steep mountainside, every rainfall became an immediate threat. Water descending carried soil with it, sweeping away whatever had not been secured. The terraces were not merely for cultivation, they held the earth in place, slowed the surface flow, dispersed the force of water, and stabilize the slopes. Rain alone could nourish the crops. Yet the terraces bore a deeper purpose to protect the mountain itself, to keep the city from being carried away by an unrelenting current. The water system of Machu Picchu moved as a living network. A natural spring above the urban sector fed a channel nearly 750 meters in length, where gravity guided the flow toward a sequence of fountains passing through key areas. The logic of distribution revealed deliberate planning from the beginning: where water emerged, where it would travel, who would receive it first, and how it might serve without causing harm. Water sustained not only human life, but also the stone and soil themselves, guarding all from a quiet yet certain decay. Much of the city's technical mastery lay hidden beneath the surface. More than 100 drainage outlets appeared within walls and courtyards, while layers of crushed stone and gravel formed a concealed structure of strength, ensuring that surfaces would neither flood nor slip. Groundwater, if held too long, would increase the weight of the soil and the pressure within it, threatening the stability of the slopes. Thus, the drainage infrastructure stood as a crucial public achievement, one that determined the survival of the entire settlement. Even when water had been mastered, the mountain still challenged with its subtle tremors. Stones were cut and joined without mortar, allowing the walls to yield slightly when minor quakes passed through. Rather than fracture as rigid bonds would, terraces, water channels, drainage systems, and stonework merged into a single living whole, binding the city inseparably to the mountain that sheltered it. The culmination of all this was not a clash of force, but a slow realization. Machu Picchu is not enduring because of its stones alone, but because of what lies hidden beneath them. The city stands firm upon harsh terrain, withstands seasonal rains, and resists erosion and structural decay more effectively than many pre-industrial works that lacked such integration with their surroundings. Without terraces, without drainage, without the precision of stonework, it might have begun to fail from its earliest days. Machu Picchu is not merely built upon a mountain, it is woven into it a delicate union of engineering, nature, and the will to survive, leaving behind a question that lingers: was its height chosen only for strength, or also to be guarded by the mountain itself? In the mid-15th century, as the Inca Empire steadily asserted its power and extended its reach, Machu Picchu emerged not merely as an arrangement of walls and terraces, but as a complete entity shaped by the mountains and valleys that enclosed it. This city did not rest upon a broad and open plateau, but seemed instead to rise from within a tropical highland forest, where steep slopes climbed skyward, clouds gathered thick, and a deep river wound far below. Terraces, pathways, and stone walls appeared to merge with the cliffs themselves, as though nature had prepared the form and human hands had only completed its final detail. Seen from afar, Machu Picchu was not only a place of habitation, but a layer of defense formed before human touch, a harmony between landscape and strategy, between terrain and mind. The mountains of Machu Picchu and Huayna Picchu stood in silent dominance, shaping a narrow ridge upon which the city rested above the Urubamba Valley. The space between the peaks formed a constricted saddle, limiting access so that every path upward wound along steep slopes, each step exposed to watchful eyes above. The Urubamba River rushed below, cutting deeply through the valley, creating a natural boundary difficult to cross, turning every route into a hidden trial. When one's gaze withdrew from the details and embraced the whole, Machu Picchu revealed itself as a natural fortress, where the stone walls of men were but the finishing touch, and the first defense was the land itself. The choice of this place belonged to the Inca elite under the rule of Pachacuti, those who looked upon the land and understood that a narrow mountain between towering peaks, encircled by forest and valley, could be observed, defended, and set apart from the open routes below. They did not fashion a fortress from walls alone, but from a decision, placing Machu Picchu within a perfect natural shield. Those who approached from below faced a trial of narrow paths, winding slopes, cloud and mist, and obscured vision. From above, movement could be easily seen. From below, all became uncertain. From its height, Machu Picchu commanded a sweeping view over the Urubamba Valley. Sightlines followed the river, traced the mountainsides, and extended along winding trails, offering complete awareness of the landscape without the need for artificial watchtowers. Below, dense rainforest, steep inclines, and veils of mist formed a soft yet steadfast barrier, slowing every advance. Together, the deep river, the sharply cut valley, the narrow ridge, the enclosing peaks, the altitude, and the humid forest shaped a first line of defense, one that required no constructed walls, no fortress in the traditional sense, yet proved unmistakably effective. The turning point comes with a quiet understanding the fortress did not begin with walls, but with the place itself. The mountain slopes limited ascent, clouds and mist concealed, forests obscured vision. The Urubamba carved a deep boundary, and elevation granted both observation and isolation. When these elements converged, they formed a defense without conventional form, yet one whose spatial power exceeded expectation. From a distance, the mountain reveals Machu Picchu as a fortress already begun by nature, awaiting only the human choice to complete it. In practice, this position allowed the city to remain hidden within its landscape while observing the entire region, controlling access more effectively than settlements spread across open lowlands. Height was not merely symbolic or aesthetic, it was a spatial strategy, a rational layer among many. If the Inca elite sought a place both sacred and secluded, resistant to direct threat and rich in meaning, Machu Picchu stood as an ideal choice, a place where nature and strategy became one. Seen from afar, the mountain is both guardian and sacred presence, offering a depth in which power and intellect found expression, a quiet testament to the union of nature and humanity in shaping strategic space. Machu Picchu, set upon the eastern slopes of the Andes, rising out of the tropical mountain forest at an elevation of 2,430 meters, endured as a world where power, nature, and ritual were woven into one another, from the mid-15th to the early 16th century, when the Inca Empire stretched its frontiers and sustained a total order-binding state, deity, agriculture, and the highland landscape. The city was never merely a refuge nor a fortress. Its order revealed a vision of the world in which every mountain, every valley, and every river bore sacred meaning, where the light of the sun, moving through its cycles and seasons, shaped the course of life, where humanity and nature did not stand apart but moved within a shared rhythm, the resonance of the cosmos seeming to whisper that ritual did not dwell only in space but seeped into every stone, every terrace, every half-curved wall, Within this vision, Intis, the sun god, reigned at the heart of the divine order, the spiritual axis around which all activity turned, while the huacas, mountains, hills, and sacred points in the terrain stood as living presences, each vantage upon the slopes reflecting the order of the cosmos, making the natural landscape itself a sacred, living part of Inca spiritual life. The mountain that once sheltered Machu Picchu ceased to be only an unseen shield, becoming instead a sacred witness where nature and divinity met. At the architectural core, the Temple of the Sun emerged as the ritual nucleus, a finely wrought semicircular structure aligned with light and celestial cycles, where Inti was honoured and solar rites were performed. Its significance lay not only in form or stone, but in the way light slipped through every opening, every curve, making it at once a sanctuary and an instrument for observing the heavens, binding human presence to the natural world. Not far from the Temple of the Sun, the Intihuatana stood as a bridge between ritual and astronomy, a monolithic stone rising nearly 2 meters high, not merely a symbol, but a device marking time, the cycles of the seasons, and the movement of the sun, a quiet reminder that each day, each season was shaped and revered, that humanity and the cosmos had never truly been separate. Machu Picchu, and all the landscape that embraced it, from steep slopes to precarious valleys, became part of a sacred domain where architecture merged with terrain, where light and shadow, sky and mountain formed notes in a silent symphony, so that every step along a rising path, every gaze cast toward the horizon, felt like an entry into a sacred order. The Inca priesthood sustained that space and filled it with meaning, presiding over rites devoted to the sun, reading the pulse of the seasons, binding the agricultural calendar to the sacred one, turning architecture into not merely a place, but a living ritual. The presence of Pachacuti and the royal elite affirmed that Inca power stood not apart from religion. They upheld and legitimized ritual, using sacred structures as instruments of state authority, so that Machu Picchu was at once a residence and a symbol of sacred order. The Inca understanding of huacas extended beyond temples to mountains, hills, and sacred features of the land, instilling the awareness that the landscape was not a silent backdrop. It was a living part of the sacred order, and this explains why a place so high, so remote, and so difficult to reach as Machu Picchu could become a site of profound meaning, where closeness to the divine was felt through elevation, through light, through rituals enacted between stone and sky. The Temple of the Sun and the Intihuatana opened the first layer of meaning, where architecture was raised not only for shelter, but to align ritual with light, season, and time. Ritual acts, celestial observations, and temporal cycles were never random. They were carved into stone, fused with the horizon, becoming a low, enduring music of light and shadow. Architecture, landscape, and sky may have been arranged in deliberate harmony, where palaces, temples, dwellings, and storehouses formed a network of space designed to elevate religious, political, and natural experience onto a single plane of life. Machu Picchu was no longer merely a city, but a sacred realm where the order of the sky, of the seasons, of the mountains, and of humankind converged, creating the sense that humanity stood closer to the order of the cosmos. Every height, every horizon, every peak became a language, a sacred expression, the Temple of the Sun, the Intihuatana, the surrounding summits, and the light of the sun along the horizon joined into a structure in which space, light, and stone took part in meaning, making Machu Picchu less a practical settlement than a place set precisely within the fabric of the universe. Terraces, walls, and ascending paths seem to grow from the mountainside itself, landscape and architecture merging, rendering the order of sky and stone tangible, forming a harmony that required no further explanation. After tracing these layers of meaning, one may reach a provisional yet grounded conclusion. The elevation of Machu Picchu held not only technical or defensive value, but a profound significance within the Inca religious worldview, where humanity, light, mountains, and time participated in a single sacred order. When a place is at once sacred, refined, and set within a deliberate landscape, those who once lived within its walls were not merely inhabitants. They were elements of a world shaped to harmonize power, nature, and ritual, where every step, every gaze, every rite became part of a living sacred order. In the mid-15th century, when the Inca Empire reached the height of its power under the reign of Pachacuti, Machu Picchu was not merely a mass of stone upon a mountainside, but a living community moving within a finely tuned rhythm. At an elevation near 2,430 meters, it held some 300 permanent inhabitants, a number that could triple when the royal retinue arrived, creating a curious balance between modest scale and constant activity. People drawn from many regions of the empire, bearing their own languages, cultures, and skills, came together to serve the life of the court while sustaining the daily rhythm of a carefully selected community. No longer cold walls nor silent terraces, every space began to breathe with human movement. Each footstep, each voice, each quiet rite leaving its mark upon the granite. Machu Picchu was arranged into distinct sectors where agriculture and urban life met in unexpected harmony. Terraced fields flowed along the mountainside, hundreds of steps sustaining the community and providing for the days when the royal entourage was present. Plazas, temples, stepped paths, and elite residences formed a coherent layout, each space linked to the next like organs within a living body, where production supported habitation, habitation sustained power, and power connected to ritual. Every stone step, every wall, every roof took on meaning as people passed through, touched, and transformed them into a community moving in rhythm, no longer scattered structures but a living body of stone. Within this space, the royal family and elite occupied the centre, where dwellings were more solid, rituals more refined, reflecting concentrated power. The chosen women carried out sacred duties, preparing ritual foods, tending the sacred fire, and weaving garments for the court, present as quiet bridges linking the different spaces and functions of Machu Picchu. Artisans, attendants, ritual keepers, and farmers from across the Inca lands formed a synchronized network of activity, each person in their place, each role sustaining the life of the city, making Machu Picchu not a crowded disorder, but a refined community where every movement and action bore intention. Its population was modest yet far from simple, sufficient to maintain a steady rhythm of life, neither as noisy as a vast city nor as empty as an abandoned place. The elite residential sector served those of power. The ritual zones held a stillness that echoed with every step, Stone paths connected all functional areas, and agricultural terraces supported daily needs, forming a living body of stone. Daily activities unfolded in coordinated rhythm. Water carried along the stone steps. Food and ritual objects prepared and moved between living quarters and sacred spaces, sustaining the needs of the elite and the functioning of the entire complex. Those who lived here came from many parts of the empire, making Machu Picchu not a single local village but a deliberately assembled community. More intricate than it might first appear, each person, each space held its place, functioning like parts of a living organism, forming a rhythm that could only be fully sensed when seen as a whole. The city ceased to be an inert structure, becoming instead a breathing entity, where life flowed through every terrace, every roof, every plaza and chamber, from footsteps to ritual acts, from tending food to managing water, all forming a complete rhythm of life. When one imagines Machu Picchu as a breathing community, its climax appears in the movement and sound of life footsteps echoing upon stone, figures carrying water along the terraces, preparations for morning rites, the royal retinue passing through each plaza, spaces opening and closing according to social order. Space reflected power, every path, every zone tied to social hierarchy, where the structure and rhythm of the community became clear. Daily acts, rituals, and mutual care turned Machu Picchu into a living body of stone, each person and each space a heartbeat within the community, where social stratification and authority revealed themselves through the ways people moved, approached, and used space. In the end, Machu Picchu was no longer a silent architectural symbol, but a community once alive, small in scale yet intricate, clearly stratified, where daily life, power, and ritual blended in every movement. That space once held breath, once carried the rhythm of living, once embodied relationships of service, once hosted rituals, sustaining a closed order of life upon the high mountains. And when such a community comes into view, the question of its disappearance deepens, stirring a mystery yet unanswered, a reminder that the place which once breathed, once moved, once lived, has at last drifted into the shadow of history. After Machu Picchu fell silent, the Andean world entered a new age, one in which power was redefined by colonial logic, more centralized, more pragmatic, and arranged around administrative centers where populations, resources, and lines of control could be more easily managed. From the 1530s onward, when the Spanish under Pizarro advanced into the lands of Peru, Cusco became the new seat of authority, the capital of a fallen Inca Empire that still bore the marks of wealth and symbols of power. This moment was not merely a point in history, but a doorway through which the Andes were seen anew, where regions no longer at the heart of power gradually slipped beyond the gaze of those shaping the new order. Machu Picchu lies some 80 kilometers northwest of Cusco, suspended above the Urubamba River valley, between two sharp peaks, set upon a narrow ridge like a misplaced fragment, cut off from the usual routes of control. Its position created not only a distance of geography, but of perception, where colonial roads did not easily reach, and the focused attention of officials did not extend. Cusco, together with the key areas of the Sacred Valley, stood forth with dense populations, gold and silver, and the visible emblems of Inca authority, exerting a far stronger pull. In such a setting, a high mountain site, no longer functioning as a centre of power, was gradually pushed to the margins of concern, forgotten within the order established by the conquerors. Vegetation crept over stone, clouds veiled the paths, and the altitude with its deep valleys turned the place into a silent figure, guarding its own secret, a place the New World seemed unable to see. Within this reconfigured Andean landscape, the Spanish conquerors did not seek Machu Picchu, but rather set out to reshape the geography of power according to immediate value. Administrative centres, where people and resources gathered and areas easily controlled, became their priority, forming the new order. In their eyes, wealth, the capacity to govern, and logistical clarity determined what deserved attention, while Machu Picchu, in its isolation, faded into a dim memory. Yet at the local level, the city endured within the memory of nearby inhabitants, known as a familiar place that no longer carried political weight. Machu Picchu, like a silent presence, sent no signal, entered no colonial map, allowing forest, mist, and terrain to conceal its existence, so that it remained hidden, almost erased from wider awareness. A great question rises within the stillness of the Andes: how could a place of such scale, with its architecture, terraces, and temples, pass out of the broader memory of the outside world, when it was no longer sustained as a living community? Vegetation and mountain mist began to reclaim Machu Picchu. Centuries passed, and the place was known only to local inhabitants, existing physically while becoming difficult to perceive in reality. Preserved almost intact, the city avoided sweeping transformations such as churches or colonial plazas, retaining its Inca structure without direct reshaping under colonial patterns, while remaining concealed within nature. As the New World chose to look elsewhere, high, isolated places no longer central to power were easily overlooked, leaving only faint traces of awareness. The most important sites in the logic of conquest were those rich in gold and silver, in population, in political symbolism, in the capacity for governance, and in clear logistical value. Cusco and other centers of power became focal points, while Machu Picchu lingered at the edge of perception, never entering the formal center of authority. Evidence of vague awareness remains only in a few brief references within colonial documents, never the object of discovery, occupation, or direct incorporation into the machinery of rule. The disappearance of Machu Picchu seems less a catastrophe than a slipping away from the map of power. It may never have been entirely lost to all, yet it gradually drifted beyond the map of official authority, absorbed into the larger currents of history. The vanishing of a city does not always require violent disaster. Sometimes it is enough that the world turns its gaze elsewhere, and nature slowly veils every trace. 3 elements were sufficient for Machu Picchu to fall beyond broad awareness: its great altitude, the collapse of the Inca Empire, and a new order too occupied with other centers. There was no great fire, no total destruction, no curse, only forgetting, distance, a quiet sadness, and a gentle mystery. The silence of nature and the slow work of vegetation played a greater role than direct violence, leaving the city in a state of near slumber, hidden within a world from which power had withdrawn. Thus Machu Picchu endured in a condition almost like sleep for many centuries, not because it was small or without meaning, but because it lay outside the priorities of those rewriting Andean history in a colonial direction. As power moved away and the new maps had no need of it, the city continued to exist while scarcely appearing in official awareness. This stillness leads into another question. If a city could be left behind in such a way, why was it abandoned, and what mysteries surround that silence, opening a deeper layer for the discoveries that would follow? Machu Picchu, set upon a narrow ridge rising high above the Urubamba Valley, once stood as an Inca center for a brief span, beginning in the early 15th century and ending in the early 16th, existing long enough to leave a powerful impression, yet not long enough to endure across generations. Recent dating suggests that activity here may have begun earlier than the time of Pachacuti, around 1420 to 1532, revealing the city not as a century-long centre, but as a compressed moment in time, a concentrated experiment in Inca architecture and power, active only for a short while before falling silent in the 16th century as the Inca Empire entered internal crisis, marked by succession wars and the arrival of the Spanish. This high mountain centre existed at the most fragile moment of the state, when political, labour, and logistical networks were no longer strong enough to sustain such an isolated masterpiece among the peaks. The question is no longer how Machu Picchu was built, but more quietly, why a place designed for permanence fell silent so soon. The entire city rests upon a ridge between Machu Picchu Mountain and Huayna Picchu, some 80 kilometers northwest of Cusco, a position that once offered isolation, commanding views and deep symbolic meaning. When the empire was strong, this terrain was an advantage, but when the center faltered, it became a burden. A high mountain center cannot live by the beauty of stone alone. It requires stable labor, steady flows of food, logistics, and the continual renewal of political meaning. As the old networks of power were shaken by civil war and the arrival of the Spanish, isolated and difficult to supply centers became more vulnerable than sites closer to the core or directly tied to new structures of authority. The city on the mountain could withstand rain, tremor, and landslide, but not the unraveling of the world that sustained it. The inhabitants of Machu Picchu were those who faced every change directly, from communal health, security, water sources, and food supply, to movement and the possibility of sustaining life within such isolation. While it remained active, a small but organized community formed a delicate network, in which the weakening of any link would be felt immediately. The Inca elite and governing structure ensured the political and ritual meaning of Machu Picchu, and when the center weakened, such places lost their role even as their architecture endured. The Spanish did not need to attack directly. By dismantling the entire Inca system, altering networks of control and dispersing labor, Machu Picchu could lose the foundation of its existence. This collapse opens a range of possibilities, not to fix upon a single answer, but to show that the mystery of its abandonment remains persistent. The central paradox of this account is a city so carefully designed, overcoming terrain, resisting rain, wind, and slope, yet falling silent too soon. The awareness builds gradually through layers of possible causes, from disease, war, and political decline to the disruption of governing and labor systems. The context reveals that at the very moment of its decline, the Inca Empire was undergoing deep fracture, and Machu Picchu could not exist apart from that larger condition. Civil war and the disintegration of authority weakened royal link centres, suggesting that abandonment did not arise from a single event, but from a sweeping collapse. Questions emerge about its long-term sustainability, whether water remained sufficient, whether food could be reliably transported, whether the necessary labour was present, whether the Inca court still had reason to maintain such a centre. A shortage of water may have been one factor, yet more crucial was dependence upon the network of power that sustained it. When that system dissolved, the very qualities that once made Machu Picchu extraordinary became burdens too high to maintain easily, too isolated to function as an ordinary settlement, too dependent on political and ritual purpose to justify its existence. The final layer brings nature into its role, pressing the city towards silence, rain, mist, mud, isolation, time, all acting as an unseen yet steady force, gradually pushing Machu Picchu beyond sight, little by little. The height of understanding lies not in a single act, but in the realization that a place built for endurance could lose its function within less than a century. Recent studies clarify that Machu Picchu existed for a shorter span than earlier romantic imaginings suggested. The stone walls may still stand, the terraces still hold the slopes, the water still finds its course, yet when the political, ritual, and human world that created them is gone, the city can die in its own way. Machu Picchu passes from a living space of ritual, power, and maintenance into a place left behind, where vegetation, mist, rain, and time take possession of all, and when the city has sunk into deep slumber, the question is no longer why it was abandoned, but who brought it back into the sight of the world, and by what means, opening a quiet pause before the stories that follow. July 24th, 1911 unfolded like a slow turning of history, as a city long asleep stepped quietly back into the wide gaze of the world. Machu Picchu, enduring through centuries, still lay hidden within the mountains and mist of the Andes, holding fast to the marks of time, beyond the reach of those from afar. Hiram Bingham III, a professor of Yale, led an expedition recorded as the Yale Peruvian Expedition, moving along winding paths where each step seemed to pour gently into the past, and in doing so, brought Machu Picchu out of silence. Its emergence into global awareness was not a sudden flash, but the result of a chain of continuous surveys, journeys extending from 1911 through 1912 and into the years 1914 to 1915, marking the beginning of a scientific inquiry that would be recorded and respected in history. When Bingham approached Machu Picchu, the city revealed itself beneath layers of vegetation covering most of its terraces and stone walls, hidden deep within the Andean mountains. The stonework and architectural forms, though shaped by centuries, still stood firm, arranged with such precision that the entire city seemed to breathe in rhythm with the surrounding peaks and forests. This moment was not a birth, but a re-emergence, as history slowly drew back its veil and allowed Machu Picchu to be named once more. Rain, mist, mountains, and forest had shielded it from the world's gaze for centuries, and in that summer of 1911 the veil began to stir with the first light of day. To reach the city, Bingham did not travel alone. His journey was guided by Melchor Arteaga, a local Quechua-speaking resident who led him along narrow, winding trails where local memory had long preserved Machu Picchu as a living secret. The city was not an empty place, but one that had persisted through time within the memory and daily life of surrounding communities. The presence of Arteaga and the local people reminds us that the moment of 1911 was a meeting of indigenous knowledge and global attention, where personal, local and global histories converged. In those first days of approach, the expedition moved through Andean rain and mist, where each path blurred into the forest, across steep valleys and moss-covered terraces. Bingham sought Machu Picchu while searching for Vilcabamba, the last city of the Inca, and unexpectedly encountered a place he at first believed to be his goal. As he stepped across the stone stairways, he beheld structures nearly intact terraces, temples, palaces, steep passages and stone steps, all standing as if to remind that this had once been the living heart of a powerful civilization. That first moment of encounter did not merely astonish Bingham, it laid the foundation for the world's understanding of Machu Picchu. Bingham's role reached beyond arrival and observation. He transformed Machu Picchu into an object of scientific study, surveying, excavating, recording, photographing, and presenting it to the international world, carrying it from silence into global awareness. His extensive articles in international journals, his lectures, and the successive expeditions in the years that followed turned Machu Picchu into a symbol, a part of Western historical discourse. Though he initially mistook it for Vilcabamba, his role was to ignite modern research, to open the way for scientific understanding and cultural value to be widely shared, rather than to unravel every mystery at once. The climax of this chapter lies not in daring action or perilous adventure, but in the moment when Machu Picchu, silent for centuries, returned to the sight of the world. History, once quiet, saw its stone walls and moss-covered terraces called by name, becoming subjects of study, record, and contemplation. Bingham brought Machu Picchu into global light, initiating modern scientific research, while the role of local inhabitants in preserving lived memory remained intact, reminding us that this return was a continuation of history, not an absolute discovery. After 1911, Machu Picchu entered a sequence of surveys, scholarly debates, photographs, writings, and excavations, steadily building its reputation across the world. The expeditions that extended into 1912 and the years 1914 to 1915 strengthened the scientific foundation and modern understanding of the city. One might imagine that without the journey of 1911, Machu Picchu might have continued to sleep in silence beneath cloud, forest, and mountain paths, distant from the broader awareness of the world for many decades more. From the moment it was brought back into view, Machu Picchu stepped into another era where fame, preservation, tourism, and global symbolism became inseparable parts of its being, continuing a long history that none had ever truly forgotten. Through the decades of the 20th century, Machu Picchu, once nearly lost within mist and jungle, slowly emerged from shadow to become a symbol watched by the world. As explorers and scholars set foot upon the high mountain slopes and carried the story of the ancient city into international awareness, the site ceased to be merely an archaeological remnant and became a meeting place of Andes and Amazon, where culture and nature intertwine in a value recognized across the globe. In 1983, the historic sanctuary of Machu Picchu was inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List, marking a decisive turning point. transforming it from a rare and nearly intact archaeological site into a global heritage, where terraces, stone walls, and mountain landscapes all form part of a living memory. In the modern era, Machu Picchu exists at the intersection of four forces: heritage conservation, mass tourism, natural risk management, and regional economic development. Efforts in visitor management, institutional capacity, and conservation policy continue without pause. Yet the site's outstanding universal value is never a finished state. No longer a forgotten city, it has become a place observed by the entire world at once, adapting step by step to the spreading attention and pressures of modern tourism. The scope of Machu Picchu today extends far beyond the central ruins imagined by most visitors. The historic sanctuary spans more than 32,000 hectares, encompassing both the citadel and the surrounding natural landscape, where the Andes meet the Amazon basin. To protect Machu Picchu is not only to preserve each stone and terrace, but to sustain the delicate relationship between structure and mountain, forest, water, climate, and the entire living ecosystem that surrounds it. This space becomes a living landscape, where the actors are no longer only human, but where nature and heritage themselves take active roles in the unfolding story. Those who preserve and manage Machu Picchu form a complex web of interaction. UNESCO frames the site within international conservation, recognizing its outstanding universal value while monitoring management, integrity, and tourism pressures. The Peruvian authorities and conservation agencies regulate tourism, maintain access infrastructure, protect the archaeological site and the wider landscape, and respond to natural threats such as landslides, erosion, and regional planning challenges. Visitors from around the world transform Machu Picchu into a global symbol, while also placing pressure upon infrastructure, movement flows, archaeological surfaces, and the natural environment. Nature remains a powerful presence, with landslides, floods, forest fires, and climate variation, both creating value and threatening sustainability. The great paradox of the modern age emerges here. A place once forgotten must now learn to endure the weight of constant observation. Machu Picchu, once hidden within cloud and forest, nearly vanished from global sight, has become one of the most renowned destinations, drawing endless images, writings, and journeys. Its inscription by UNESCO in 1983 marked the moment it became a global symbol, the most intact surviving testament of the Inca civilization. That fame carries with it a responsibility of preservation efforts to manage visitor flow, diversify experience, and reduce tourism impact continue so that Machu Picchu may endure within its fragile highland setting. In recent years, concerns regarding visitor management, regional planning, institutional capacity, and the impact of growing tourist numbers or new projects have been closely observed. Conservation status reports require continuous updates of measures to safeguard outstanding value and ensure sustainable management. Beyond human pressure, nature continues to pose its questions through landslides, floods, forest fires, and climate change, making Machu Picchu a particularly challenging heritage to preserve. It does not stand upon stable plains, but within a high mountain ecosystem where nature remains the dominant force, reminding us that all intervention demands caution and deep understanding of the environment. The greatest triumph of Machu Picchu in the modern world lies not in the number of visitors, nor in the breadth of its fame, but in its ability to endure beneath the gaze of millions, amid movement, expectation and economic demand. It is a subtle victory, upheld by UNESCO, which both celebrates its outstanding universal value and emphasizes conservation, sustainable management, and visitor regulation. A place once kept hidden by forest and cloud must now learn to withstand unceasing attention. The convergence of pathways and crowds, and the weight of modern pressure, revealing a deeper reflection on the fragility and resilience of all heritage. In the present age, Machu Picchu stands as a global symbol of Peru, of Inca heritage, and of the relationship between humankind and extreme landscapes. Its renown brings an ever-growing responsibility of preservation. Tourism offers benefit, yet requires delicate governance, while nature bestows beauty and harbours long-term threats. A quiet speculation arises what might come to pass if nature, once the force that protected Machu Picchu with cloud, mountain, and isolation, were to become the force that erases its traces. This is not a fixed prediction, but a reminder that preservation is an act of the present, not a passive faith in the immortality of stone. After all that Machu Picchu has endured, built, lived, abandoned, brought again into sight, and drawn into the modern world, what remains above all is its capacity to endure, a natural transition opening the path toward the next chapter of its journey. The 20th century opened a global gaze upon Machu Picchu, where a city set high among the mountains ceased to be a silent enigma and became a legacy through which the modern world learns to read the imprints of the past. Here, beyond the reach of time and terrain, it stands as one of the most emblematic inheritances of the Inca civilization and of the entire Andean realm, a place where art, architecture, and the use of land attained a rare mastery. The legacy of Machu Picchu is not merely a vision of stone, terraces, or walls, but the enduring testament of those who shaped it, who knew how to form and define a landscape, to order space, and to sustain it across the centuries. Questions of purpose, of origin, still linger, yet what they wrought remains unmistakable in stone, in terraces, in form, and in the quiet persistence of time. Machu Picchu is not simply a centre of ruins, but an extended inheritance, encompassing stone architecture, terraced systems, spatial planning, and a seamless union with the mountains and the surrounding world. It resembles a sanctuary, where archaeological value, architectural form, land use, and the natural environment are interwoven into a complete whole. Each terrace, each block of stone, each pathway serves not only beauty or function, but belongs to a living system, where the craft of landscape engineering reveals itself with clarity. Walls cling to the mountainside, terraces hold the earth, sustain cultivation, preserve water, and restrain erosion, transforming a harsh incline into a city that endures and breathes through time. The central presence in this chapter is no longer an individual, but the Inca as a collective. Those who left behind a legacy of technique and architectural thought that transcends time. They shaped a Machu Picchu that endures to this day, a testament to extraordinary engineering and stonework, in quiet harmony with its setting. Modern archaeologists, engineers, and scholars step into the role of readers of this inheritance, seeing it not merely as a beautiful ruin but as a complete technical system, where walls, terraces and pathways form a network in dialogue with mountain, water and earth, revealing the thought of those who once lived here. the modern observer inherits this legacy, learning to see beyond surface beauty, to understand that Machu Picchu is a synthesis of technique, thought, and symbol, where the ordering of space and the mastery of environment become visible. Its enduring value appears in the very stone structures that have withstood centuries of mountain rain, seismic tremors, and erosion. These works testify to the remarkable technical skill of the Inca, where each stone was cut and fitted with precision, holding the whole in quiet strength. The terraces are not only fields of cultivation but a technology of landscape stability, preserving water, limiting erosion, and transforming steep slopes into a living network where earth, water, and stone act as one. The mortarless stonework, the tight joining of blocks, grants resilience against humid climates, steep terrain, and the trembling of the earth, revealing a union of aesthetic grace and technical mastery. Beyond each individual structure, walls, paths, and terraces are arranged into a coherent whole with the mountain itself, turning the entire landscape into a living system, a profound achievement in land use and landscape engineering, where harsh nature is shaped into an order of life. The culmination of this chapter lies in a shift of perception. Machu Picchu is not merely a beautiful landscape, but proof that the Inca could transform a severe environment into a living system, where cultivation, ritual, and authority exist in full integration. The city upon the mountain becomes a masterpiece of harmony between urban design and the natural world, where terraces, walls, and sloping paths reshape the mountainside, bearing witness to a vision that reaches beyond time. This legacy of thought reveals itself in how the Inca did not simply build upon the mountain, but thought with the mountain, did not merely guide water through the city, but made the city part of the movement of water, did not simply set stone, but allowed stone to speak in the same language as slope, earth, and sky. In this, Machu Picchu rises as a rare testament to the union of humanity and environment, of technique and the art of living, of symbol and function. The legacy of Machu Picchu does not rest in a single mystery, but in a rare convergence of technique, geography, culture, and symbol, enduring stonework, the craft of landscape engineering, the ordering of space in harmony with the mountains, all come together to form a presence that remains tangible. If one imagines Machu Picchu as an optimal model of a pre-industrial stronghold, remote yet integrated with its landscape, sustained by infrastructure, natural defense, and ritual depth, then the question of meaning remains open, a reflection on humanity's capacity to organize, to control, and to harmonize with the demanding world. Machu Picchu endures not only as a material inheritance, but as a layered system of functions, a reminder that the union of intellect, technique, and landscape can leave marks that outlast time. Each terrace, each stone, each pathway at Machu Picchu carries a message of human capacity, of how a civilization perceived the world, and how the present reflects that intelligence. This legacy does not merely preserve the past, but opens a meditation on harmony between humanity and environment, between authority and nature, between symbol and function, creating a legacy that calls all who approach it to learn how to read, how to feel, and how to revere. Machu Picchu emerges through the mists of the Andes as a whole that has passed through the current of time, where past and present meet in a moment of stillness. The mountains surrounding the Urubamba Valley retain their ancient form from before the Inca, while each terrace, each stone, each temple bears the imprint of a sequence of events: the rise of Pachacuti, construction, operation, abandonment, rediscovery, and modern preservation. Machu Picchu is no longer merely an archaeological site, but becomes a sanctuary where culture and nature are inseparable, where every stone, every forested slope, every veil of mist carries meaning that cannot be divided. Seen as a whole, Machu Picchu appears as a unified composition: mountains encircling, clouds drifting, the Urubamba River flowing quietly below, terraces winding among sacred precincts, stones fitted with precision, and a silence that spreads between them. This vision is no longer a collection of structures, but a singular marvel, where natural landscape, Inca achievement, and the ordering of space merge beyond separation. Within this whole, the figures of history appear in another form, no longer as individuals bound to time, but as presences within a greater landscape, where every decision and action still lives on in stone, in terraces, in space. Pachacuti returns not as a ruler in action, but as the embodiment of a moment when a geographic choice became a civilizational one. The Inca, as a collective, transformed altitude into strategy, stone into system, water into infrastructure, landscape into meaning. They turned decision and labor into structures that endure, where technique and planning unite with authority and ritual to create a Machu Picchu that withstands time. To behold it in its entirety is to be invited into the sensory world of the Inca, to see not only stone, but the logic, the consciousness, and the meaning within each detail, the synthesis of all layers of significance shaped across ages. 3 layers of conclusion emerge within this space. First, Machu Picchu is not merely an ancient city or a beautiful ruin upon a mountain, but a symbol of a civilization that mastered terrain, technique, ritual, and authority within a single space, a material legacy beyond time. Second, scientific understanding of landscape engineering, terraces, water distribution, and erosion control does not diminish its mystery, but deepens it, so that each step and each observation carries greater awe and reverence. Third, a gentle supposition opens another vision if one were to enter Machu Picchu not as a visitor, but as an Inca, observing the sun, the mountains, the water, and one's own duty. Then the entire city would appear transformed, a complete synthesis of ritual, landscape, authority, technique, and life, in perfect union with the natural world. The culmination of this conclusion gathers all layers into a single image: Machu Picchu, as a point of convergence between nature, culture, technique, and authority, a masterpiece of harmony between urban design and the natural environment. It is not merely a fortress, not solely a city or a temple, not simply a dwelling or a destination. It is a language of stone that history is still learning to read, where each stone, each terrace, each stretch of forest tells the story of the Inca civilization and of those who shaped will into reality. The final moment brings a sense of quiet peace, without urgency, without the need to resolve every mystery in order to recognize its greatness. The more deeply it is studied, the more it reveals itself, clearer yet deeper at once. The ending fades like clouds along the mountainside, gentle, profound, inseparable from the landscape, reflecting the very logic and essence of Machu Picchu, a place where structure and mountain become one, where every mystery deserves to remain, where humanity and nature coexist in stone, in water, in terraces, and in endless space. In its entirety, Machu Picchu stands not only as a monument, but as a story, an experience, the enduring life of a civilization where history, technique, belief, authority, and nature meet in perfect stillness, and where, in the end, every figure, every detail, every layer of meaning remains complete, while opening endlessly into questions of the bond between humanity, will, and stone,